You missed a spot. If you're going to kneel there all afternoon, at least make it worth my time.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I almost forgot. I'm hosting the Aurora Heritage Foundation Ball this Saturday. You should come. Wear something nice.
Ariana Whitmore knelt on the cold marble floor of the CO Estate's grand foyer, a damp cloth in her hand. The polished stone reflected the crystal chandelier above and her own distorted image below. She scrubbed carefully, moving in slow circles, as if she had done this all her life. She had not. Ariana Whitmore was 26 years old. She held an MBA from Yale University. She was the CEO of Whitmore Global Holdings, a technology and investment company valued at $3.8 billion. Financial magazines called her a prodigy. Business networks invited her to speak about leadership and innovation. Investors competed for her time. And yet, for 3 months, she had been scrubbing floors. You missed a spot. The voice came sharp and careless. Sumin Seo stepped across the marble without looking down. She did not pause. She did not soften her tone. She was dressed in a silk lounge set and diamond earrings that caught the light each time she moved. Her phone was pressed to her ear as she laughed at something one of her friends had said. Ariana lowered her eyes as expected. She wiped the same section again. Sumin stopped a few feet away and turned slowly. Her smile was sweet but empty.
Actually,
she said, tapping her chin, I'm hosting the Aurora Heritage Foundation Ball this Saturday. A charity gala. Very exclusive. Her friends stood near the doorway, holding designer handbags, freshly manicured fingers wrapped around expensive coffee cups. They watched with open amusement. You should come, Sumin continued. Wear something nice. It will be hilarious watching you try to blend in with actual people. The women laughed. Ariana kept her face calm. She nodded once, as if grateful for the invitation. Yes, ma'am. Sumin turned away, satisfied, her heels clicking across the marble Ariana had just cleaned. The laughter faded as they disappeared down the hallway. Ariana continued scrubbing. But in her mind, she was already choosing her dress. The midnight blue custom gown from Florence. The one tailored by hand. The one that fit like liquid silk. Yes, that one would do nicely. 3 months earlier, Ariana had walked into a small employment agency downtown wearing a cheap polyester uniform she had bought from a discount store. Her hair had been tied back simply. She wore no makeup. She carried a plain tote bag filled with cleaning supplies. The receptionist had stared at her application. Miss Whitmore, the woman had said carefully, this is an entry-level housekeeping position. Minimum wage. Are you sure? I'm sure, Ariana had replied. The woman had looked confused, but processed the paperwork. What the agency did not know was that Ariana had spent 6 months planning this move. Whitmore Global Holdings had been approached by CO Imperial Hospitality Group for a partnership worth $200 million. On paper, the company looked solid. Profitable hotels, growing market share, strong assets. But Ariana's internal audit team had flagged irregular financial transfers. Small but repeated. Patterns that suggested old money routes. Rumors connected the CO family to organized crime from years past. She could have sent lawyers. She could have hired investigators. She could have walked away. Instead, she chose something else. If I'm investing $200 million, she had told her board quietly, I need to see the truth myself. So she had entered the CO household as a maid. Now, 3 months later, she knew more than any outside report could reveal. Min-jae Seo, the head of the family and the public face of CO Imperial Hospitality Group, ran his business with discipline. The hotel operations were structured. The staff were paid above market rate. Records were clean. Policies were clear. Ariana had observed carefully. She had listened. She had taken mental notes. Whatever illegal activity had once existed was small now, hidden, and slowly being removed. Min-jae was trying to build something legitimate. His wife, however, was another matter. Sumin Seo treated the staff like furniture. She rarely used names. She corrected small mistakes loudly. She invited friends to watch and laugh. She believed money gave her permission to be cruel. Ariana had endured every comment without reaction. That evening, as Ariana stored cleaning supplies in the servants' quarters, Madame Hyrin Choi appeared at the doorway. The older woman carried folded linens in her arms. Her expression was thoughtful. You speak differently, Madame Choi said quietly. You stand differently. Your hands, they are not used to this kind of work. Ariana smiled gently. I needed a job. Madame Choi studied her for a long moment. Maybe. But you are not ordinary. Ariana did not respond. Madame Choi stepped closer and lowered her voice. Whatever brought you here, do not let Mrs. Seo break your spirit. Ariana met her eyes. Breaking was not in her vocabulary. She had not built a billion-dollar company by surrendering to pressure. She had not fought her way through boardrooms filled with older men by being fragile. She returned to her small room that night and sat on the narrow bed. 3 months in, $200 million at stake. A man trying to escape a dark legacy. A woman who believed power came from humiliation. And now, a public invitation designed to embarrass her. Ariana Whitmore leaned back against the wall and allowed herself one quiet smile. Let them laugh. Saturday would come soon enough, and she would not arrive as a maid. Ariana Whitmore stood in the CO estate kitchen polishing a silver candlestick when she felt someone watching her. The kitchen was quiet. The other staff had already finished dinner preparations. The only sound was the soft scrape of cloth against metal. Okay, a calm male voice said behind her. I know you're not really a maid. Ariana did not jump. She placed the candlestick down slowly before turning. Daniel Cho leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and usually expressionless while on duty. As head of security for the CO household, he noticed everything. Excuse me, Ariana asked evenly. Daniel tilted his head slightly. I've worked security for 15 years. Corporate events. Political families. I can spot a fake ID from across the room. Yours is good. Very good. But not perfect. Ariana held his gaze without speaking. You also slip up, he continued. Last week you mentioned a Harvard Business Review article that was published 3 days earlier. Most housekeepers don't keep up with business journals. There was no accusation in his tone. Only certainty. Are you going to tell Mr. Seo? Ariana asked quietly. Daniel shrugged. Depends. Are you FBI? Corporate spy? Rival group? None of the above. Then what are you? Ariana studied him carefully. Over the past 3 months, she had observed him just as she had observed everyone else. Daniel treated staff respectfully. He never raised his voice. He was loyal to Min-jae Seo, but not blindly so. I'm conducting due diligence, she said at last. A business investigation. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Corporate. Yes. He let out a low whistle. You went undercover as a maid for a corporate check? Yes. Daniel shook his head slowly, half impressed. That's bold. The less you know, the safer you are, Ariana replied. He gave a small smile. Too late. I already know. Silence stretched between them for a moment. Daniel pushed off the counter. So this gala Mrs. Seo invited you to, she's planning to humiliate you. That seems to be her intention. Are you going? Absolutely. His grin widened. Oh, I need to see this. Ariana almost laughed. What makes you think you will? Because I'm helping you. She blinked. Why? Daniel's expression shifted. Because I've watched Mrs. Seo treat people like decorations for 3 years. I've been waiting for someone to knock her down a little. He extended his hand. Partners. Ariana looked at his hand, then shook it. Partners. At that exact moment, Madame Hyrin Choi stepped into the kitchen carrying a stack of folded towels. She paused. What are you two plotting? She asked. Daniel straightened too quickly. Nothing. Madame Choi narrowed her eyes. You are a terrible liar. She set the towels down and turned to Ariana. You are planning to attend the gala properly, aren't you? Ariana did not answer directly, but her silence said enough. Madame Choi's lips curved into a small smile. Good. The whole staff knows about the invitation. And the whole staff is hoping for something interesting. Daniel chuckled. See, you've got supporters. Later that evening, Ariana returned to her small room in the servants' wing and locked the door. She took out a secure phone she kept hidden inside a false lining of her bag and dialed a familiar number. Adrian Cole answered on the first ring. Boss, he said immediately. You okay? I'm fine, Ariana replied. I need arrangements for Saturday. Tell me. I want the custom midnight blue gown from Florence delivered to the penthouse suite at the Grand Han River Regency, the Aurora Ball location. There was a brief pause. You're revealing yourself, Adrian said. Strategically. And the diamonds? The full set. He let out a soft breath. Understood. Penthouse already secured under your alias. Hair and makeup team on standby. Arrival time. Late enough to be noticed. Adrian's tone shifted to professional. We've maintained monitoring on the CO business operations as requested. Financial trails are stable. No significant red flags in the past quarter. I know, Ariana said softly. You've confirmed that personally? Yes. She sat on the edge of her bed. The hotel operations are structured, she continued. Payroll clean. Vendor contracts transparent. Any questionable activity appears to be small and fading. Adrian hesitated. Then the partnership? I'm leaning toward approval. And Mr. CO? Ariana looked toward the small window. He's trying to build something legitimate, she said quietly. There was a pause on the other end. That's not what I asked, Adrian replied carefully. Ariana exhaled. This is business, she said. Nothing more. But even as she spoke the words, she felt the slight tension in her chest. Over 3 months, she had observed more than balance sheets. She had seen a man carrying the weight of a family legacy he did not entirely agree with. She had seen him treat employees with fairness. She had seen fatigue in his eyes when no one else noticed. It complicated things. Just stay focused, Adrian said gently. You went in for due diligence. I know. Saturday changes everything. Yes, she agreed. After the call ended, Ariana sat quietly for several minutes. Daniel knew. Madame Choi suspected. The staff were quietly rooting for her. The gala was no longer just an invitation. It was a turning point, and Ariana Whitmore was ready. Madame Hyrin Choi found Ariana in the hallway outside the dining room late that evening. Mr. CO would like to see you, she said quietly. Ariana paused, a folded linen cloth still in her hands. Did he say why? Madame Choi shook her head. No, but he looked curious. Curious was not a comforting word. Ariana smoothed her uniform and followed the corridor toward the private executive library. The double wooden doors stood slightly open. Warm light spilled into the hallway. She knocked softly. Come in, Min-jae Seo's voice called. The room smelled faintly of leather and polished wood. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls. A large desk stood near the windows, 2 monitors displaying financial reports. The atmosphere was controlled and precise. Min-jae stood when she entered. That alone surprised her. Most employers did not rise for household staff. Close the door, he said gently. Ariana obeyed. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Sit. She hesitated only a moment before lowering herself into the seat, keeping her posture modest, eyes lowered just enough to maintain her role. How long have you been working here? He asked. 3 months, sir. And my wife invited you to the Aurora Ball. Yes, sir. Silence stretched between them. My wife has a sharp sense of humor, he said carefully. Not always kind. Ariana remained quiet. You do not have to attend, he added. I understand why she invited you. To mock me? Ariana asked softly. His jaw tightened slightly. Yes. She lifted her eyes just enough to meet his. I appreciate your concern, she said. But I would like to go. Min-jae studied her closely now. Not as an employer looking at staff, but as a man trying to solve a puzzle. You are not like the others, he said. Sir, you speak well. You carry yourself differently. Your hands do not show years of manual work. Ariana's heartbeat quickened. Who are you really? He asked. She held his gaze for a brief moment before lowering it again. I needed employment. He leaned back slightly, still watching her. No one with your education and composure needs employment like this. Her breath caught. Then he asked the question directly. Are you investigating me? There was no anger in his tone, only honesty. Ariana considered denying it. That would be the safest choice. Instead, she chose truth. Yes, she said quietly. I am conducting due diligence. He did not look surprised. For my company, she continued. Your group approached us about a $200 million partnership. I wanted to see the truth from inside. Min-jae nodded slowly. And what have you found? He asked. That your operations are structured. Your staff are paid fairly. Your business model is stable. And the rumors? He pressed. Old patterns, she said. Small. Fading. A faint expression crossed his face. Relief, perhaps. He stood and walked toward the bookshelf, then turned back toward her. I have known who you are for 2 weeks, he said calmly. Ariana's head lifted sharply. You ran a background check, she said. I run background checks on everyone who enters this house, he replied. Yours came back interesting. Why didn't you confront me? He held her gaze. Because I wanted to see what you would do. Silence filled the room again, but it felt different now. You could have asked me to leave, Ariana said. Yes, but you didn't. No. She felt the shift between them. the quiet understanding that they were no longer pretending. "I look forward to meeting the real you," Min-jae said softly. Her breath slowed. "And at the gala?" she asked carefully. He walked toward the door and placed his hand on the handle. "At the gala," he said, glancing back at her, "I suggest you destroy her." Ariana blinked. He opened the door slightly, the hallway light framing his figure. "My wife believes power comes from humiliation," he continued. "Perhaps she needs to learn otherwise." There was no cruelty in his expression, only resignation. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The air felt charged, not with conflict, but with recognition. He knew who she was. She knew he was trying to change. Two people standing on opposite sides of reputation and rumor, meeting without masks. "Good night, Miss Whitmore," he said quietly. The use of her real name sent a subtle shock through her. "Good night, Mr. Seo." She stepped past him into the hallway. As the door closed behind her, Ariana felt something unexpected settle in her chest. This was no longer just a business investigation, and whatever happened at the Aurora Ball would not be simple. Min-jae Seo had given her permission, not to humiliate, not to boast, but to stand fully as herself. And he would be watching. The Aurora Heritage Foundation Ball was already in full motion by the time the clock struck 9. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above a ballroom filled with the city's elite. The polished floors reflected designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Soft music drifted through the air while servers moved carefully between clusters of wealthy guests. At the center of it all stood Soo-min Seo. She wore a glittering silver gown and diamonds that sparkled each time she turned her head. A glass of champagne rested lightly in her hand. Her smile was practiced, elegant, and slightly proud. "The foundation means everything to me," she said sweetly to a circle of guests. "Supporting the less fortunate is a responsibility we must all embrace." Her friends nodded dramatically, hanging on to every word. They knew this performance well. The charity was prestigious. The guest list exclusive. The photographs would appear in society magazines by morning. One of her friends leaned closer and whispered, "Did your little maid actually show up?" Soo-min glanced at the large clock mounted near the balcony doors. "It's already past 9, she said smoothly. She was supposed to arrive at 8. I suppose she realized this environment might be too intimidating. Soft laughter rippled through the group. Or maybe she couldn't find anything appropriate to wear. Another friend added with a grin. They laughed louder this time. Soo-min lifted her champagne glass slightly. "It would have been amusing," she said. But perhaps she understood her place. Across the ballroom, Daniel Cho stood near the entrance in a fitted black suit. His posture was professional, but his eyes held a quiet anticipation. His phone rested discreetly in his hand. Madame Hyrin Choi moved between guests carrying a silver tray of champagne glasses. Her uniform was neat, her expression calm. But her eyes flicked toward the ballroom doors every few seconds. Near the stage, Min-jae Seo listened politely to a businessman discussing real estate expansions. He nodded at the appropriate moments, but his attention was divided. His gaze drifted toward the entrance more than once. Then the ballroom doors opened. It was not dramatic at first, just the soft sound of hinges. But the shift in energy was immediate. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. Music continued to play, but it felt distant. Ariana Whitmore stepped inside. The midnight blue gown fit her perfectly, flowing like liquid silk with each step she took. The fabric caught the chandelier light and shimmered softly, elegant but powerful. The cut was refined, tailored to emphasize grace rather than excess. Around her neck rested a diamond necklace worth $2.3 million. The stones were flawless, arranged in a delicate pattern that reflected light like fire. Several guests recognized it instantly from auction catalogs and private showings. Her hair was styled in smooth, elegant waves that framed her face. Her makeup was flawless but understated. She did not look like someone trying to impress. She looked like someone who belonged. The ballroom fell silent. Daniel's lips curved into a slow smile as he lifted his phone slightly, recording without making it obvious. Madame Choi nearly missed a step. The tray in her hands tilted slightly before she steadied it. Her eyes widened with pride. Min-jae went completely still. He did not blink. Across the room, Soo-min froze mid-laugh. For a second, she did not recognize the woman standing at the entrance. Then she did. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. Ariana began walking forward. Each step was steady, controlled, unhurried. Guests parted slightly without realizing they were doing so. The air seemed thinner, charged with something electric and undeniable. Whispers began. Who is she? Is that the Whitmore heir? Is that the diamond collection from the private Florence auction? Ariana did not look around. Her gaze remained forward. Daniel shifted slightly to keep her in frame. Madame Choi watched with quiet satisfaction. Min-jae's expression held something unreadable, not surprise, not shock, but something deeper. Respect, perhaps. Su-min stood motionless, staring. The confident smile she had worn minutes earlier had disappeared. Her friends stepped subtly backward, as if distance might protect them from whatever was unfolding. Ariana stopped several feet from Su-min. The music faded completely now. Every eye in the ballroom was fixed on the woman who had once scrubbed marble floors in silence. The air felt heavy with realization. This was not just an entrance. It was a declaration, and everyone knew it. The silence in the ballroom stretched like glass ready to crack. Ariana Whitmore stood only a few feet from Su-min Seo. The shattered remains of the champagne glass lay at Su-min's feet, glittering under the chandelier light. Ariana smiled, warm, controlled, almost gentle. "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Seo," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "It was thoughtful of you to include me." Su-min opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I wasn't sure what to wear," Ariana continued, lightly touching the diamond necklace resting at her collarbone. "But then I remembered you said to wear something nice. I hope this qualifies." A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. "Is that the Heritage Diamond Collection? It sold privately for over $2 million. Who is she?" Su-min finally found her voice. Where did you get that?" Ariana glanced down at her gown, as if noticing it for the first time. "Oh, this," she said softly. "It was custom made for me in Florence last year. The designer insisted on handling the final fitting personally. She sends her regards." The whispers grew louder. Daniel Cho stood near the entrance, openly smiling now as he continued recording. His shoulders shook slightly with quiet amusement. Madame Hyrin Choi had stopped pretending to circulate drinks. She stood still, watching with satisfaction she did not bother to hide. A tall, distinguished man in his late 50s pushed gently through the crowd. "Ariana Whitmore?" he asked, disbelief in his tone. She turned smoothly. "Good evening, Gregory." Gregory Langford, board member of Whitmore Global Holdings, stared at her in confusion. "We've been trying to reach you for months. Your assistant said you were unavailable." "I was conducting due diligence," Ariana replied calmly. The word carried weight. Several guests gasped softly. Gregory looked around the ballroom. "What is happening here?" Ariana turned back towards Su-min and Min-jae. "Allow me to clarify," she said, raising her voice slightly so all could hear. "I am Ariana Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Global Holdings." The room erupted into murmurs. "The tech conglomerate? She's worth billions. She was the maid." Su-min's face drained of color. "You scrubbed my floors," she whispered. "Yes," Ariana said evenly. "I did." She let the silence settle before continuing. CO Imperial Hospitality Group approached my company regarding a $200 million partnership. Before approving such an investment, I chose to observe the operation from the inside. Shock rippled across the ballroom. "I spent 3 months working in this household," Ariana continued. "I cleaned. I polished silver. I listened." Her gaze shifted toward Madame Choi. "I learned that dignity has nothing to do with job titles. Madame Choi showed me more kindness in 1 week than some people show in years." Madame Choi's eyes filled with quiet emotion. Ariana then turned her attention directly to Su-min. "You invited me here tonight to humiliate me," she said calmly. "To entertain your friends. To laugh at the maid who did not belong." The room felt tighter. "But the joke was never on me." Su-min's friends had already begun stepping away from her. "You saw a uniform and assumed weakness," Ariana continued. "You saw service work and assumed worthlessness. That says everything about you." Daniel spoke up lightly from near the doorway. "She applied for a job and earned it. No deception there." A few guests chuckled nervously. Madame Choi added gently, "I asked who she was. She simply said she needed work." The subtle commentary only deepened Su-min's isolation. Gregory cleared his throat. "Are you saying the partnership is still under consideration?" Ariana nodded. "It is no longer under consideration." The room went silent again. "I am approving the $200 million partnership," she said clearly. CO Imperial Hospitality Group's operations are structured, disciplined, and largely clean. Min-jae's eyes widened slightly, though he remained composed. He pays his staff fairly, Ariana continued. He remembers their families. He is building something legitimate. She glanced briefly at Sumin. Most people in this house deserve respect. The distinction was clear. Sumin looked around desperately, searching for support. None came. Her friends avoided eye contact. Guests whispered behind raised hands. "This is outrageous," she said weakly. "You infiltrated my home." Ariana's expression remained steady. "I accepted employment. You never asked who I was." Daniel gave a soft laugh. Min-jae stepped forward at last, standing beside his wife. Sumin looked at him, pleading. "Are you going to let her do this?" Min-jae's voice was calm. "You humiliated yourself." The words landed harder than any raised voice could have. Sumin stared at him, stunned. The distance between her and the crowd widened invisibly. Conversations resumed, but not around her. Guests drifted toward Ariana and Gregory. Laughter returned, softer, more respectful. Sumin stood alone in the center of the ballroom she had once commanded. Ariana offered her one final polite nod. Then she turned away, the room following her movement as naturally as breath. The execution had not required shouting. It required truth, and truth had done the rest. 2 weeks later, the city skyline stretched wide beneath the glass walls of Sky Tower headquarters. Ariana Whitmore stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office on the 30th floor. The afternoon light reflected against the polished table behind her, casting long, clean lines across the room. The space felt powerful and quiet at the same time. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she said. Min-jae Seo stepped inside. He looked different here. Without the heavy atmosphere of the estate or the pressure of a public ballroom, he appeared lighter. Still controlled, still composed, but less burdened. He closed the door gently behind him. "I signed the divorce papers this morning," he said without hesitation. Ariana turned to face him fully. "It's final?" she asked. "Yes." He nodded once. Sumin agreed to a quiet settlement. No public dispute. "She's relocating to Los Angeles." Ariana studied his face. There was no anger there. No celebration either. Only something steady. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He shook his head. It was necessary. He stepped further into the room and sat across from her desk. "I should have ended it years ago," he admitted. "It was a business arrangement between families. Convenient. Strategic. But not real." Ariana remained silent, allowing him to continue. "For 5 years," he said, looking down briefly, "we lived like partners in public and strangers in private. No affection. No respect." He lifted his eyes to hers. "Then you arrived." The air in the room shifted. "I knew who you were after 2 weeks," he said calmly. "When I ran the background check. I could have confronted you immediately. I could have asked you to leave. But you didn't," Ariana said. "No. Why?" He leaned forward slightly. "Because I didn't want you to go." The honesty in his voice was clear and unguarded. "I told myself it was curiosity at first," he continued, "that I wanted to see how far you would take your investigation. But that wasn't the whole truth." Ariana felt her pulse steady but strong. "I watched you," he said. "The way you treated the staff. The way you observed everything without arrogance. The way you carried yourself even in silence." His voice softened. "I began to look forward to seeing you in the mornings, to our short conversations, to knowing you were there." He paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. "I fell in love with you." The room felt very still. Ariana walked slowly around her desk until she stood directly in front of him. "You understand what that means," she said quietly. "You were married." "Yes." "And I was undercover." "Yes." "And now?" she asked. "Now I am free," he said simply. "And I am asking for a chance." Ariana studied him for a long moment. The man in front of her was no longer shielded by status or reputation. He was simply honest. She leaned down and kissed him. The gesture was not rushed. Not dramatic. It was certain. When she pulled back, he was smiling. "So," he said softly, "does this mean the CEO of Whitmore Global Holdings is considering dating a former businessman with a complicated past?" Ariana smiled. "It means she is considering dating a man who chose honesty." A light buzz interrupted the moment. Daniel Cho's voice came through the office intercom. "Boss," he said carefully, "I hate to interrupt what sounds like a very important meeting, but Madame Choi is here. She insists that both of you look too thin and require immediate feeding. Ariana laughed. Send her in, she replied. Moments later, Madame Hyrin Choi entered the office carrying 2 insulated food containers. She looked from Ariana to Min-jae and then nodded knowingly. I knew it, she said proudly. I told Daniel these 2 would not stay professional forever. Min-jae raised an eyebrow. You were betting? Of course, she replied without shame. The entire staff was betting. Daniel's voice called faintly from outside the door. I lost $20. Madame Choi placed the food on the table and folded her arms. You should learn not to doubt me. Ariana shook her head, amused. You all had faith in us? Not faith, Madame Choi corrected gently. Eyes. Min-jae chuckled. The tension that had defined the past months felt distant now. There were still contracts to finalize, public statements to manage, a new chapter to build. But in that moment, in the bright quiet of the Sky Tower office, none of it felt overwhelming. Min-jae reached for Ariana's hand. This time, there were no disguises, no investigations, only choice. And both of them were choosing. 6 months later, the Whitmore Service Workers Initiative Gala filled the Grand Horizon Ballroom with warm light and steady applause. The event was different from other charity galas in the city. There were no exaggerated speeches about influence or prestige. The decorations were elegant but simple. The focus was clear from the moment guests entered. This night was about recognition. Ariana Whitmore stood backstage, holding her speech cards loosely in her hand. She wore a deep emerald gown, refined but understated. There was no need for dramatic entrances anymore. Across the room, Daniel Cho stood in a tailored navy suit instead of his usual security attire. He looked slightly uncomfortable without an earpiece, but there was pride in his posture. Near the front row sat Madame Hyrin Choi, dressed in a graceful silver hanbok-inspired evening gown. Her hair was styled neatly, and she looked both dignified and quietly pleased. Min-jae Seo stood near the side of the stage, watching Ariana with steady admiration. The announcer called her name. Ariana walked onto the stage to warm applause. She paused at the podium and looked out across the crowd. Good evening, she began. Her voice was calm and clear. Tonight is not about wealth. It is not about influence. It is about dignity. The room grew still. 6 months ago, she continued, I learned something important. I learned that society often overlooks the people who keep it functioning. She looked toward the front row. Housekeepers, drivers, assistants, maintenance workers, security staff, the people who arrive early and leave late, the people who clean, protect, organize, and support. Several guests nodded. These roles are often dismissed as ordinary, Ariana said. But they are not ordinary. They require discipline, patience, strength. She paused. I graduated from Yale believing leadership was about strategy and vision. I was taught to measure success through numbers and results. A faint smile touched her lips. But the most valuable lesson I learned was not in a lecture hall. It was about character. She turned slightly toward Madame Choi. Character is revealed in how we treat those who cannot benefit us. Dignity exists independent of social position. The applause was soft but sincere. I spent time observing what respect looks like, Ariana continued. I saw how simple kindness can restore confidence. I saw how acknowledgement can rebuild pride. She lifted her hand gently. This initiative is dedicated to honoring service workers, not as background figures, but as essential pillars of every organization. The lights brightened slightly as screens displayed images of scholarship programs, employee recognition awards, and training grants funded by the initiative. Ariana stepped away from the podium. Tonight, we recognize someone who embodies quiet leadership, she said. Someone who carries herself with grace regardless of circumstances. Madame Choi's name was announced. The audience rose as she made her way to the stage. Daniel clapped enthusiastically, forgetting his usual reserve. Min-jae's expression was warm and proud. Ariana handed Madame Choi a crystal award. You once told me not to let anyone break my spirit, Ariana said softly into the microphone. That advice changed more than you know. Madame Choi's eyes shimmered with emotion. You never needed protection, she replied gently. You only needed opportunity. The audience applauded again. After the speeches and formal presentations concluded, guests mingled freely. There was laughter, conversation, and a lighter atmosphere than most galas carried. Min-jae joined Ariana near the side of the ballroom. You were remarkable, he said quietly. She smiled. It's easier to speak when the message is honest. He glanced down at her left hand, where a subtle diamond ring rested. The engagement had not been formally announced, but it was visible to anyone who looked closely. Some guests had already noticed. Ariana followed his gaze and smiled slightly. Not everything needs a headline. He nodded in agreement. Later, on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Ariana leaned against the railing. The night air was cool. Min-jae stood beside her. I heard from Soo-min, he said calmly. She has begun therapy. She sent congratulations. Ariana considered this quietly. Growth is possible, she said, for anyone willing to face themselves. Below them, Daniel's voice drifted upward. I told you they would step out onto the balcony, he said. Madam Choi laughed softly. That's another $20. Ariana shook her head with a quiet smile. Min-jae reached for her hand. The city lights shimmered below, indifferent to status, wealth, or reputation. Dignity was not something given by applause. It was not measured in diamonds or titles. It was chosen, in private moments, in public actions, in the way people treated those who had nothing to offer in return. Ariana leaned into Min-jae slightly peaceful. The lesson had been simple all along. Worth is not defined by wealth. It is defined by character. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.